Welcome to the Networking with Michelle podcast, the show dedicated on providing you the how-tos of marketing and networking strategies. Here we believe in the Jim Rohn quote, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Networking with Michelle. I'm your host, Michelle Gomez. So I love to read. I really can't believe I'm saying that because that was not what I wanted to do in college. But I love to read. I usually read a lot of business books, and I have interviewed a lot of authors on this show, as you know. But my thing is business books, right? I'm just a business blurred. Okay. But today's guest is Gregg Korrol, and he is the author of The Gifted Storyteller. And I was absolutely blown away by this book. It's a beautiful book, quick read. It was a page turner. Probably read it like less than 90 minutes. And The Gifted Storyteller is all about one thing I learned from my stepmom, she would always say this. You never know when you're ministering to angels. You never know when you're entertaining angels, and how strangers just appear at the random moments in life, and whether they help you in that moment, which could be a 5-minute conversation or maybe a 5-year relationship. You just never know when you're entertaining angels. And this book, The Gifted Storyteller, reminded me of that message that my stepmom would always tell me when I was younger. So I really hope you enjoy this interview. It's pretty much discussing, of course, his book, as his book shows us the beauties of life. So without further ado, Gregg Korrol, The Gifted Storyteller. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Networking with Michelle. Today's guest is Gregg Korrol. He is the author of the new book called The Gifted Storyteller. Gregg, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed your book. Before we get into that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Overall, I am an educator. I spend my days actually working in a school where I work with kids and teachers and I'm trying to better our future, so to speak. I believe in really bringing in life's philosophies into what I do, and that's part of the reason where The Gifted Storyteller came from. I hit a point a few years back where I realized, working with so many educators, we could teach teachers and work with people about teaching English or math or social or science, and all of those skills are incredible and great, but what matters most is the teacher. And people always say, especially in education, it's all about the teacher. We all have teachers that we look back on in life, and some people really made a huge dent in our life and did things that left us with true memories. And it's because of the connections that were created and the way they presented. So it really sat with me that you have to work with people. It doesn't matter what business you're in. And I say it's all about the teacher. It doesn't matter if you're the cable guy or a plumber or whatever you do. It's about the person you are and what you're bringing to what you do. That makes all the difference. So, of course, with teachers who are standing in front of kids, who they are and how they present themselves is going to make so much more of an impact as to how they deliver what they're going to deliver.
So the book, The Gifted Storyteller, this is a quick read. I definitely want to encourage everyone to jump on Amazon and get this book. I read it in less than 90 minutes tops. And I got so into the book, right? To the point that I was like predicting the conversation. And I was like, this book needs to be a movie. So I know we're jumping ahead, but any plans?
You're actually not the first person to say that to me. Hey, if somebody is interested, I would love it. I would love to be involved, because truth is, as you say, it's a quick read, and, a lot of people don't have time to read in life. So I wanted to make something that you could read through. And, there are certain books in my life that they're short reads, but they're like grab and go books. Like, I know if I'm going out for a day, I could throw it in my bag and just take it with me and maybe read a passage or reflect on something that was said that would inspire me. So I really wanted to create something like a companion for people that they could have, that they could go through quickly and, just makes them think about life or makes them think about their day. So there's room for expansion if any producers or directors are listening. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. But why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about the book, the concepts?
Okay, so The Gifted Storyteller is really about that voice in your head. So we all have a voice in our head that steers our whole life. As somebody once said to me, no matter who you meet in life and no matter what you do, when it comes down to it, you wake up with yourself in the morning and you're going to go to sleep with yourself at night. It's that voice that's talking you through your entire life. So The Gifted Storyteller is about that voice that let me backtrack for a second. What kind of amazed me is the fact that you can take 20 different people seeing the same situation, and some people see it as a disaster, and other people look at that exact same situation and see it as an opportunity. And that always fascinated me because it was all about the story you told yourself about that situation. So I came up with this term, the gifted storyteller, because anything with that much brilliance that could take any situation and say, well, what's funny about this? What's an opportunity about this? What could make somebody sad about this? And then actually play out that story, to me was just genius. And so I use that analogy of the gifted storyteller because we're all kind of these storytellers going through life. Situations present themselves and we decide how we're going to react. Unfortunately, sometimes we're kind of going on autopilot and we're not really even conscious. We're reacting rather than responding to a situation. But I think that's how we get lost, and that's how we kind of find ourselves being upset or angry a lot. So again, the gifted storyteller talks about that voice. Having said that, it's a story. It's not this is what you do first and this is what you do second. It's a story about a character named Michael who, and I felt this way at some point in my life, and I know many people have, that you did everything right. In other words, you worked hard, you made money, you're independent, you've grown up. And it doesn't matter what stage you are in life, if you're in your 20s, 30s, there are people in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s who hit this point where you kind of feel just stuck. Like you're seemingly successful from an outsider's point of view, but you're not feeling that way necessarily. And so the question becomes, how do I make myself feel better about my life? And what happens in this book is Michael's kind of hitting that moment where he just feels stuck. And he's also going through a period where he's actually losing his father. His father's in the hospital. That's how we begin the book. And, so he's going through a real rough patch in life. And one night he goes out to a bar and he's sitting there and basically going into a story. So I refer to it as storytelling, when you kind of get lost in your thoughts and you're not even aware what's happening around you, which we all do every day at some point. But so this woman named Jeannie sort of watches him go into a story and catches him and introduces herself by actually calling him out on the fact that he's storytelling. So it carries you through this book where basically he again is experiencing different things in his life, and she comes in and out of his life to kind of guide him onto how to use his voice to better his story. And I use the analogy of an optical illusion a lot because it's a very concrete way of seeing things. In other words, right off the front of the book, and also on my website or wherever else, I use this analogy of this illusion of the two faces looking at each other, or the vase. There's tons of optical illusions, but I like the premise that in any image that's an optical illusion, if you shift your focus, you could see it in one way, or you shift your focus and you see a completely different picture. And I think that's how we kind of look at life.
So, one, you're a good writer. I love reading it because you were so descriptive. I felt like I was in Michael's head. I felt like I was standing in the middle between Michael and Janine through the conversation, right? I felt like I was really right there with them. So what was your inspiration? Like what were you drawn to tap into that in order for you to write this book?
In terms of where the characters came from?
Yeah, the characters and pretty much the storyline.
Really, the trick or the problem, if you will, whichever way you want to look at it, was, so many people say they want to do something or they want to write a book. And I had that, I'd wanted to do it for 20 years, but never really just sat down and did it. So I hit a point where I kind of told myself, I'm going to write for 15 minutes a night. So after work and after, spending time with my family and putting my daughter to bed, then I first sat down. I said, how could you just not do 15 minutes? So for the first time, I actually didn't think too much about what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Which is, I think, what kind of stopped me in the past. It became a block thinking about it. So I actually started by drawing on some of what was happening at the moment, which was my wife's father was unfortunately, on his way out, for lack of better words, he was passing, and he was in the hospital and going through a very rough period. So I began with that and integrated. There were basically a bunch of lessons I wanted to hit upon. So I kind of had a list of things in my mind and on paper of what I wanted to touch upon, and threaded that through the story. So a lot of the actual story took place through things that were happening at the moment or experiences from the past kind of blended together. And I have to say, it was the first time where I understood what people say is when the characters kind of write themselves, because it became that kind of thing where I'd sit down the next day and I'm like, okay, this happened to him. What's going to happen to him next? Let's see. And it would just kind of roll out. It was kind of cool, actually.
With this book is filled with nuggets, just gems on life and perspective. My question to you is, do you think self-awareness is derived from our own conscience or is based on our active relationships with people, family, friends, work, etc.?
I think it's a combination. I think we have certain insights, and I think it was Socrates who once said, knowledge is just remembering. In other words, remembering the things you forgot. Because so many times you can hear inspirational speakers and you're like, well, I know that. You just didn't think of phrasing it that way or saying it that way. But having said that, I also think that our relationships with people in the world, be it, a close marital relationship or just friendship relationship or coworkers, it's an opportunity. I see the world, for lack of better words, as a playground. In other words, you're in this environment where you get to interact with people, and every single person and situation is kind of a test for you to discover more about yourself. And it magnifies us, because if you think about times that have been maybe regretful in life or things of that nature, a lot of times it was when you said something or did something to or with somebody else. So in other words, if you didn't have that moment where you said something you kind of regretted saying, you wouldn't have learned something about yourself. So I think relationship magnifies our experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I hear the whole self-awareness and mindfulness now. I mean, I'm in my 30s, so I don't know if it's something that is necessarily the timing of 2016, 2017 versus me just aging up. But do you think I'll just say emotional intelligence, do you think that's something that can be taught to our children these days, especially with you being in the school system?
Absolutely. It absolutely can. And there are so many programs out there that do that. There's a program called The Leader in Me, which is based on Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There's a whole thing around mindfulness. I think her name was Carol Dweck. I was just speaking to somebody who works in junior high school somewhere. I forgot where, not in Brooklyn though. And her school, they bring in mindfulness, but mindfulness can definitely be brought in. And it's something actually the school system, at least in our area, is trying to bring in, because we want kids aware of feelings and why they're doing things. I questioned it at a point too. Is this in other words, does awareness come from kind of unwrapping the problems that you've already experienced, or can you learn it in advance? And I think hearing it even as a child and being taught about mindfulness and being aware of your feelings and emotional intelligence, even if it doesn't sink in at the level it would in your 30s or 40s or et cetera, it's there. And once it's there, it's something you can kind of reference and say like, oh, that makes sense to me. It's kind of like, how like when you're looking for a car or something, or you're looking for an outfit, and you see it for the first time in the store or whatever the case is, and then you're thinking about it, and all of a sudden that car is everywhere, or that outfit is everywhere. You just see it everywhere. So I think it's kind of like, and you never saw it before, but you know it was there. So I think it's kind of like that. You have to hear things, and you have to have some seeds planted, so to speak, so when the time comes, they can blossom.
That's a good point. That is very true. That is very true. One of my favorite quotes you stated, now correct, I know I saw this on your blog, but you said life doesn't happen to you, it happens from you.
Yes.
I just wonder, what has led to this quote, or what did you experience to come up with this perfect saying?
Oh, thank you. Well, actually, it's kind of a twist on something. I'm not sure if it's Tony Robbins had said or Jim Rohn had said that life happens for you. It might have actually been Paulo Coelho. I'm not actually sure who said it. The Alchemist, great book, by the way. But like I think in The Alchemist, he kind of says that the universe is always conspiring for you, that the universe is happening for you. But the way I thought about it in terms of what I was writing and what I was doing is life is also happening from you, because you're making every moment you're making a decision. Somebody says something to you and there's 50 different ways you could respond to them or react to them. And each one of those responses will change the outcome of that conversation and potentially what that person does for the rest of the day and what you do for the rest of the day. So it's actually your life is coming from your decisions, from what you're choosing to do and how you're choosing to interact with the world. So that's where I kind of took the life is happening for you and kind of twisted it a little to life is happening from you.
Yeah, I love that. One thing that I've recently acknowledged, and it was kind of a friend questioning me. She was, because I would talk to her and I'm like, "How was your day?" And she was like, "Long. I'm tired." And I get it, but I feel like life is so beautiful. And she was like, "Michelle, you never had bad days." And I'm like, I never thought of it, right? And I guess I'm in a period in my life where the good days definitely outnumber the bad days.
That's awesome.
But I told her, I was like, yes, I have good days, but it doesn't mean bad things haven't happened today. I just don't let that one bad thing predicate the whole 24 hours or however many hours are left of my day.
Well, yeah, first of all, I think just the fact, mentioning being in your 30s, that was a significant time period for me too, because I think you spend, your first 20 years, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in terms of going to school or whatever else. Now your 20s, you graduate college or you start working, whatever your journey is, and you're looking for a relationship and you're trying to figure out what is going on, because you've always heard in your, head, when I grow up, and then at some point you're like, oh man, I think I'm grown up. I don't feel that way, but that's what everybody's telling me, type of thing. So I think in your 30s, and it's hysterical. There's a comedian who I love, my wife and I love. Her name is Ali Wong. She has a great Netflix show anyway. But she introduces this whole moment where she says, like, being in her 30s was like, oh my God, how bad have I screwed this thing up, and how do I turn it around before it gets worse? I thought that was brilliant. But I think that's what kind of goes on in your 30s. So yeah, I think you're right on target. And in terms of what you were saying before, in terms of it's where you put your focus. In other words, it's not that you're not having bad days. You're just not going to focus on it. You could focus on what's negative is always there. It's, again, using the optical illusion. The two faces are always there. The negative is always present, but so is the vase. So is the positive. So is the opportunity. It's just, what am I not seeing? Like, how do I change my thinking to see what I'm not necessarily seeing at the moment? And a lot of times we run on patterns. So we think the same way every single day and do the same thing every day. And it's very easy to get stuck. Sometimes, and I think, it was kind of mentioned in the book, when he's going through what he's going through with his dad, it shatters your world and opens you up to an experience. And some people can get very lost in that experience of loss, which could be a loss of a relationship, loss of a friendship, loss of anything, or it can inspire people. You take anybody who fights for a cause. I use Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, for an example, but, somebody there lost their child. That's devastating. But they also took action to create a positive experience to protect and help others in that process. That's not to say that they don't still experience that loss and sadness, but they're placing their focus on helping others. And so it's hard. It's like, people always say, am I an optimist or a pessimist? Glass half full. To me, the glass is always full. There's just air in there aside from the water. You just have to choose to see and know that. And the more you spend your time focusing on that and seeing what you can get out of a situation or how you can help somebody in a situation, that becomes your habit.
Any advice on how to stay present?
For me, yeah. First of all, I think the awareness that you do get lost in stories is so vital. I think the first step anybody needs to do is really sit there and see and reflect on their day. It doesn't have to be their lifetime. It could be today. How many times did I get lost in a story? How many times was I driving and so lost in what I was thinking about that I really wasn't even aware how I got from place A to place B? Or watching a movie or watching a TV show or reading a book. And 5 minutes went by and I'm not even sure what just happened because I was lost in something else. So I think just being aware that this is happening to you is a huge first step. I think once you start becoming aware of it, it starts changing things tremendously. I think the next thing you do is really just sort of say, well, where am I at this moment? Because if you think about it, there's a million things happening around you right now. We're just eliminating most of it from our focus because we'd be going nuts. If you think about the fact that, right now your listeners are listening to this podcast, but they're also, maybe sitting in a chair and they could be feeling the cushion underneath, their backside, or they could be hearing sounds of cars driving by, or hearing a baby driving in the background, or whatever the case, driving in the background, you know what I mean? Hearing a baby or a car in the background, or whatever the case is, there's all this stuff going on in the environment that we kind of block out. But if you take a moment and just close your eyes and take a deep breath, or look at something around you and just focus on it for a moment, it pulls you right back into the present. So I think those two things are a great way to start, to, try more and more to say, well, where am I? Because as you know from reading the book, there's also this thing that I've kind of realized is that, when you're present in a moment and when you're present in life, things kind of just show up. Sometimes we call them coincidences or whatever the case is, but it's interesting the magic that can happen just by really listening to somebody or really being where you are at a given moment. That if you're so lost in your thoughts, you're not even aware it's happening and you're missing out on some great opportunities.
That's a good point. I think society, we're so consumed. We're so consumed with content, social media, the content's on social media. I don't know. Well, I think one thing I do, I was going to say, I don't know how to break through that, but that's not true. Because most mornings, I do like to meditate for at least 5 minutes. And I do it in the morning because I feel like if I don't take the time out now, I'm not going to be able to take the time out later because people are going to be pulling and tugging. I'm driving, I'm listening to podcasts, phone calls. It's just so hard to break away from everything that's being hit at us in order for a lot of us to be present. Or I still struggle with that.
And I think it is an everyday struggle. In other words, myself too. I'll still see myself storytelling and catch myself. But the more I'm aware of it, the less it's happening. Or I can easily switch out of it. The social media thing, yeah, it's easy to get consumed because, what if you're not? What if you weren't connected to the world, so to speak, and you really just spend time listening to your thoughts? People can go a little crazy. I think social media is also really just about wanting to connect with other people. You want to share your experiences. You want to paint yourself in a certain light so people maybe quote unquote like you. Thumbs up, little heart, the whole thing. But I think that's really what that's all about. Is it's just a deep want for connecting with other people. The only thing about social media is that the responses are quick and you can choose to ignore them. Whereas if you have a conversation with somebody, you have to respond right there and then. And you may not always hear what you want to hear, or it may not even be the most comfortable of conversations, but that's human interaction. It's a wonderful thing. And it can be sticky and uncomfortable, but that's also where the growth is sometimes.
As I was reading your book, I couldn't help to think, just a couple of months ago, I finished reading The 5 Love Languages. And Janine would kiss Michael on the cheek, and she said, language is the key to unlocking someone's world. And she mentioned, or it was at least mentioned twice, like, this is the language you speak. Is there any correlation with that? Am I reaching?
No, I've read the book a couple of years ago, but there's a lot of things that I've listened to, again, going back to whether it's the 5 languages of love or, Tony Robbins does a lot of stuff, and Jim Rohn does a lot of stuff like this. A lot of people talk about, and what I've realized is that the language we're using, like the words I'm using, if I some exercise that I do with people sometimes is I say, if you take the words, good, great, excellent, wonderful, and rank them from lowest to highest, some people, of course, everybody's going to put good and, great on the bottom. And then the wonderful and excellent become a little tricky.
That's true.
So if the word for you, like the top level there, is wonderful. But when I'm communicating with you, my top word, let's say, is excellent. So I say that's excellent because I'm speaking my language. You may be saying, oh, that's great, but why isn't it wonderful? So it's not that I meant that, to bring you down in a level, so to speak. That's how I'm speaking. But if I can speak to you in your language and connect with you in the way that you use words, then all of a sudden we're talking. I'm making sure that you're hearing what you need to hear so that you're understanding what I'm feeling or thinking, if that makes sense. It's important. Yeah. It's part of developing relationships because we are so oftentimes lost in ourselves that we're forgetting the whole point of a relationship is to relate, to connect with somebody else. And it's not that you're being manipulative or this and that. You're caring enough to really listen to this person and how they're viewing the world and how they're viewing language, or rather using language to view the world. And you're making sure you're speaking to them in a way that connects with them.
Love it. The whole point of a relationship is to relate.
Yes.
So simple, but so profound.
It's true. It's not easy. It's never easy, but that's why relationships are actually the biggest way to really self-discover. I see that with my my wife, with my daughter especially, because I could use certain words and her facial expression. Kids don't hide it, so they're not poker players. They're just the straight out. So the way she will reflect what I'm saying based on how she's feeling or what she's giving me physically in terms of.
Okay, great. So your website is thegiftedstoryteller.com. Please, everyone, go check it out. I am wrapped up in this story. So what is next with Michael? Is there going to be, I know you have a blog and a podcast. Does the story continue?
The story will eventually continue. I have 2 more books in the works. One more of sort of unpacking some of the lessons and more of an explanation of this. And then there's, I don't know if you want to call it a sequel, but another stage in his development. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, because I'm excited, but I don't want to give it away also. But okay, this is really a good book, everyone. Like, I got caught up in the story to the point where I was predicting the next conversation, the next sequence of events. And I don't get wrapped up in books like this, at least nonfiction books. So I was brilliantly amazed by everything.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So I know I just mentioned the books and everything. Are you working on anything else? What can people expect from you?
Well, I'm continuing to, do my job and work with children and teachers. I do enjoy it still tremendously. So I'm going to continue working on that. And also working on books on the side in the evening, continuing to do that. Eventually, I would like to do more speaking and, perhaps coaching down the line and working with people individually. So, those are kind of my next steps.
Got you. And what is the best way for one to get in contact with you? A website, social media?
Well, website is, you mentioned thegiftedstoryteller.com. Facebook is facebook.com/thegiftedstoryteller. Twitter's a little different. It's @thegifted_story because they don't have enough letters for @thegifted_storyteller. But simplest way is to email me is greg@thegifted_storyteller.com. I would love for people to reach out. Feel free. Any contact, I'm more than open and welcome to. I would love it because it's great to hear, just like you said, that the book is resonating with you. And I have to say, I've gotten a lot of amazing emails recently. The book's only been out for less than a month, actually, but I've gotten a great amount of emails kind of pointing to certain questions or, more information. And I respond to everybody who contacts me straight out. So it's important to me because we're all in this together. And, if something that I've created is helping you on your journey, then that excites me. That's awesome.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for, once again, writing an amazing book, but putting that perspective of life's journey, and I read a lot of business books. So this book was definitely a breath of fresh air, but still so impactful that I was literally writing down quotes and things.
Wow.
Like, okay, Michelle, what am I doing with my life that will benefit others? I'm going to ponder on that. So thank you. And the final question, how do you define success?
How do I define success? I think success is a moment to moment thing. I think success is, how did I help somebody today? What did I learn today? Did I make sure I made time for the people who are important in my life? Those kind of things, those kind of moments, because it's the moments that add up to life, if you will. I don't think it's good to think of success as this thing that's in the future and that you're going to happen this one thing. I mean, if you think about it, even people I hear a lot of people talk about wedding days, for example, and they'll spend 2 years preparing for the wedding, and the day is over in the snap of a finger, and yeah, that's it. And, there's always going to be something more. So I think success is really just enjoying the journey. Whatever you're doing, really trying to find, well, what's great about this? How can I make this into something that's going to, make somebody smile or have a good time or have a good meal? Or even if you're going to be by yourself, what can I do in this moment that's going to invigorate me and excite me? So to me, that's what success is. It's those moment to moment. What can I do with this moment? How can I create a moment? And I talk about that on one of the podcasts I put out, just about creating moments in life. Doing something that's out of the ordinary or unexpected that makes somebody crack up or they see or whatever the case is. And you get one of these cool memories that you have for the rest of your life.
I love it. A moment. Success is a moment. Gregg, once again, I want to thank you for being on the show. Everyone, I want to encourage you to go to Amazon, pick up the book, The Gifted Storyteller. I will have the link in the show notes. Remember, I believe in you, and a personal connection leads to an influential network. So thanks for networking with Michelle.